Great, thank you. I liked Afsana's word of togetherness. I had working together, but I'll use togetherness instead. So I thought I would kind of group my remarks into three different categories about the research collaboration, the role of research. And I think just over the years and having exposure to Ellen, she's always said that, her goal as a grant maker is to set the grantees up for success. And I think she absolutely did that. And I think a lot of that is both the design, but also we need to give a lot of credit to the partnership that was formed through this. And just to mention them all, because I didn't before, AED, which is now FHI 360, UC Davis, BRAC, Save the Children, GMMB, IFPRI, and World Vision. And I feel like we had kind of a best in class in all these different kind of domains. And it was not always easy, but through that collaboration, and I will air dirty laundry. I think we really got, again, the best possible outcomes. So just a little bit about the togetherness. So I think having a quasi-independent research kind of evaluation arm that had dedicated people in country was really critical. That came up, I think, in Afsana's remarks as well. But by having a group that was together but also separate in many ways, understanding the program, and that then plays out in many different iterations and kind of manifestations that I'll mention in a moment. But certainly in terms of rigor from the outset, I think as programmers, we intuitively know a lot of things and kind of sometimes are very implicit in what we're doing. And working with researchers from the very beginning, they made us be very explicit, whether that's through program pathways that you want to tear your hair out about, but you do it and you get there, and that was incredibly important. So having them engaged at the beginning, embedded with the program teams, but also still being a bit separate was really useful in so many different ways. I think that certainly helps with credibility, of course. And over my career, I've had the pleasure of being working with a lot of different nutrition programs, many of them doing really good work. One of the real differences here was the ability to really capture that good work and document it in such a rigorous way. And I think that again is to the design and then the execution of this partnership. As Purnima mentioned, and Zoe, who's in the crowd from Alive and Thrive, shared with me this morning, over 74 peer-reviewed journal articles published since December 2010. So really getting this information into the global literature. And making what we as programmers intuitively think sometimes, really testing that and pressure testing that, which has been really helpful. Some of the ways that we were engaged together, having the entire team at partners meetings. So, all going to Bangladesh and staying at the BRAC Training Center or ILRI campus or wherever it was. So I think the researchers really saw struggles that we were going through, and frankly, I think drew a deep appreciation and understanding of programming that may not have otherwise, not to put words in their mouths, but I think, that I feel like, definitely grew over time as we more on the implementation side, could really appreciate a lot of the challenges that the evaluation teams and researchers were facing. Through all this, obviously, different perspectives, and that's, I think, really critical in terms of having different perspectives to challenge different conversations, and that's so incredibly important, not obviously to have the data, but that interpretation around the data and really going back and forth. And there have been some very heated discussions that have been really useful to figure out kind of where we end up. So that exchange of ideas, I think, is incredibly healthy and important. I will say, that comes along with different groups have different priorities, and also since I'm here at IFPRI, I'll give props to the home team here for this chapter that Marie and others wrote on challenges around nutrition-sensitive programming chapter. But, a lot of the challenges in here, and Jeff, I see you in the crowd as a co-author too on this, are fairly, non-unique in that, yes, you're going to have different groups with different perspectives, with different kind of reward systems. So, for example, priority on publishing may be a real issue for one of the partners. It may be less of a priority for other partners. So relevance of topics, ability of the project to share findings before things are published. All of those are real tensions you have to work through. I think those also really provide growth opportunities. So IFPRI and other partners who've published have been incredibly generous in terms of being very fair and inclusive on publishing and including program people that might not always have that opportunity. So again, I think it's always a push and pull, but you get there. But there are some real issues that need to be sussed out. The second kind of big bucket after the togetherness piece, and this kind of all blends a bit, is really, I would say, around logistics and time frame. And this were, again, some very pragmatic things that we learned that have influenced how we're doing research now and in the future. Issues like, endless conversations about when does a project really start? What does that mean?
Define implementation.
Yes, can you define implementation? These sort of kind of conversations that you just keep having. And, costing, what do you classify where? These were all things that we've really kind of gone through the trenches on and emerged the other way, still really good friends. So that's good to say. That can all be done very collegially. But those sorts of, again, what is implicit or just kind of presumed, making that really clear and explicit. Issues around lengths of questionnaires that came up all the time, feeling like they were onerous. But then you see the data that Purnima presents that we wouldn't have known that all these other underlying factors were shifting if we didn't have that, right? So I think, again, a real appreciation. But, when it's happening, a lot of tension around that can come out of it. One of the things that I think we've talked a lot about that's been really useful, and I think we really have a voice of unison around this, is the idea that you do really need sufficient coverage and duration to implement a study, an evaluation of this caliber, typically. And you need to, share and frankly spend time with donors, not this donor, but other donors, about, what does that look like to merit that sort of investment, and what can you expect? And that was really important for Alive and Thrive. You heard Afsana talk about what can you expect on stunting? What can you expect on behavior change in a 5-year cycle? Those were all things we learned a lot about. So that was really important, and I don't know how many times I called up Purnima just because she's so great with all the literature and able to synthesize it and just kind of have somebody there to kind of give you the shortcuts, and what's out there was really, really helpful. One of the things that I would say I don't think we've really cracked the net on entirely is still midterm sort of process evaluation, and anything in the midterm, trying to get, and Purnima mentioned this, and I think we've done the best we can, but I think there's still room to grow and refine, is around this idea of using data for really, feeding it back into programs in real time. And I'm not sure we're there yet in terms of getting it exactly where, it's really going to be timely and useful. Sometimes the big process evaluations feel like mini impact evaluations. They're really helpful. They may not be as accessible as programmers would want them. But again, I'm not sure what would be. Sometimes you just want it immediately, and you can't do that. So we did things like, instead of a full report, give us a PowerPoint slide deck. That so again, made changes along the way. But I think that's something that is still out there to work on. And I will try to wrap it up. I think, lastly, on the technical side, and I would be remiss in not mentioning this, Purnima shared a lot of results. We have many more on our website and all the papers that we've mentioned. I think we learned a lot. We learned a lot about the framework. We learned a lot about something Purnima didn't present as much, but it was the layering effect of these different interventions, the interpersonal with the mass media. What do you get? What, if you had to kind of put your resources someplace, where might you do that when you have limited resources? What's the kind of added value of these different efforts? Was incredibly important, and that would not have come out without these sort of rigorous, well-designed impact evaluations. We often hear about the black box. Most programs are not able to disentangle that. We got somewhere on these, and that was really exciting for us. Also, I would mention just the aspects that early on, when this program was designed, I think we did think we could get somewhere with IYCF on stunting. I think we then, as more data came out, we recognized that actually growth is just as important as stunting, and And that really what we were doing was narrow, and that some of the early papers that IFPRI produced on determinants from our baselines showed that other things like WASH and food security had a really important impact on linear growth as well, and that we would really need to again check what we thought might drive some of these outcomes. So that made us kind of scratch our heads and rethink things a little bit too. So I think I'll leave it at that, but those are just kind of top of head. I know it's a little bit of a mismatch of some, very kind of pragmatic operational, some more kind of collaboration issues. And I should also mention those are really reflective of the team. So Jean Baker, who Maureen mentioned, I spoke with her about this, Sylvia Allion, Joy Del Rosso, and others from Alive and Thrive. So thanks.